Hello, everyone. It is so good to see you again. Welcome to Nom Talk Network, also a part of Nom Talk Network, but actually we're doing Nom Watch review tonight. On this show, we review the latest film drop or throwback celebrating a milestone while eating and drinking our favorite movie snacks. So my name is Jordyn Orozco, and right now I'm enjoying a Siempre Vida cocktail, which is not really Siempre Vida cocktail. I just am naming that right now. All it is just raspberry vodka and some club soda with a little squeeze of lime. I needed something refreshing. And I ate earlier because I'm really full right now, so I'm not really eating anything right now. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. And here are my lovely guests. I'd like to say hello to Erric and Toni. It is so good to see you, Erric. It's nice to meet you. I've never had you in one of our reviews, but it's definitely awesome to have you. So I'm excited to talk about this movie that we are going to be talking about. And if you don't know from my background, we are definitely talking about the 1992, I think it's 1992, it's 20-year anniversary, film, Death Becomes Her, starring the wonderful and talented and amazing Meryl Streep, Bruce Willis, Goldie Hawn, and Isabel Rossellini, along with our other star-studded cast in it. And yeah, but first and foremost, I'd like to say hello to my guests. Erric, what are you eating? What are you drinking? What's going on tonight?
Hi. Just eating Twizzlers Pull and Pill because I had a craving for some Twizzlers and these looked delicious. And then drinking because I completely forgot about everything. My boyfriend, luckily enough, had a Mike's Harder. So we're doing that one today.
Is that just like higher in alcohol content?
Yeah, a little bit. And it tastes better. It's not as
gross,
like rubbing alcohol as you think it would be.
Yeah, that's good. I gotta try one of those. My first drink ever when I was, I probably shouldn't say the age. My first drink ever was a Smirnoff Ice, and it was disgusting. Yeah, that was my first drink. So now they've come out with so many other things. But yeah, awesome. And Toni, it's so good to see you again. What are you eating? What are you chomping on? What's going on?
I'm drinking water, Fiji water, because I am a water snob. And I just did come back from Comic-Con, so I'm like deeply dehydrated just because I didn't do a lot of drinking. In fact, I really didn't do any kind of drinking that wasn't like not at dinner. But when you're there, you're just not even thinking about like, how to take care of yourself. So like I don't know how I'm alive right now because I definitely was not like drinking any kind of water. It was just like sodas and Gatorades and whatever con food that was there. So I just got done with a bag of Skinny Pop popcorn and I seasoned it with like my new favorite thing, Amish country popcorn seasoning, dill pickle. It's effing amazing because Trader Joe's, you can never depend on them to have their pickle popcorn. Amazing, but again, it's a seasonal item. But then because all the hipsters at Trader Joe's just snatch that up, so you can never. But in the backup, I got my trusty sour cream and onion Pringles, so that's what I'll be munching on throughout today's show. So
yummy. Yeah, I hate those like seasonal items, especially. I mean, Trader Joe's is known for them, but it's like the pumpkin cream cheese spread. Like it only comes around in fall, and then when they're out, and you're like, you literally had it for 2 days. You had it for 2 days and I got one.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, we're out. When do you know when you'll be? No, we don't. Okay, well.
Right. I could find it all day, every day back in Florida, like in a red state where there's hipsters. But like, out here, like crazy madness. Haven't had it since. I actually have one friend who she lives up in Jersey and she will ship me bags of pickle popcorn just because she knows that it's like very difficult for me to get it out here. But then she's the same one who sent me my dill pickle seasoning. So I've been saved. Thank you, Julia. Love you.
That is a diehard friend, a true friend right there.
Well, I was just going to say also that's very smart. Like, you know what I mean? Like I need to hit up some family members that are like across the US to be like, hey, can you send me the
your snack underground. Yeah, your underground.
100%. Underground snacking.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's amazing. Well, let's get into this movie because this movie, man, I just remember seeing it when I was really young, and by really young I meant like I think I was in high school to like fully understand it. Because I know my mom would watch it, and I was in high school in like the early 2000s, and like just exploring sort of myself. And then I think it was just on one time, and it was like back then it was like you had two cable companies, right? We had the shittiest one because, you know, my parents were middle income, and I think it was just on. And so I just like sat and watched it with my mom, and I thought it was the most incredibly well done and amazing movie that I've ever seen. And the acting in it is just phenomenal from these four, right? Like you have this movie where it could have easily have been a flop. It could have easily been a flop. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it could have easily have just been like forgotten, and nobody could have remembered it if you had the wrong people playing these parts.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, throughout the years, it became like I don't want to say a cult classic, but it became like there was a fandom, right? Like it became something where it was almost along the lines of like 9 to 5, right? Where it was like it was those movies in those days where it just sort of became like a staple in people's like film libraries. And I know for me, like I didn't truly appreciate it until I was older. And then, you know, you start to understand like the connections between people, and, you know, people's obsession with wanting to look beautiful, wanting to live forever, and like just that vanity aspect of the movie, mixed in with some comedy is just absolutely amazing. So me growing up watching this film, it definitely changed meanings for me as I grew into adulthood. But it still produced that same sort of Meryl Streep, Goldie Hawn, like overboard type feel, right? Like, you know, with Bruce Willis and all of that. And it just sort of gave me it's always a joy to watch. Like when you rewatch it, regardless of whoever you watch, it's always amazing. So Toni, what was your experience with Death Becomes Her? What was your first interaction with it?
So in 92, I would have been 8 years old, but I have a feeling that I don't remember seeing this in theaters. So it must have been the first time seeing it would have been on HBO. So probably 93, 94. And HBO had this really, they had this really smart promotional thing where the behind the scenes featurettes, like a small, like 5 to 10 minute featurette, would feature on HBO before you actually like premiered it on HBO, right? So I remember there being like, you know, this, 5-minute little clip about how it was industrial light and film, like light and magic. You know, they were doing all these like crazy green screen things and effects, that the special effects was going to be like the reason why you watch this movie. And I'm like, I knew the name Meryl Streep, like as much as you could, like as a 9-year-old kid, you're just like, I know that name. That's the name of a movie star. But like none of the movies that she had made up to that point I was not like telling my mom to go take me to a Meryl Streep movie. And I remember this being the first time I ever saw like, oh, I get it. I understand now. Like clocked in, got it, understand that, like, but now thinking back, especially within Meryl's filmography, this is like very, very, this deviates greatly from her usual picks, for projects. You know, at this point, she was very much like the Oscar darling. She only picked these very serious dramas. She had comedies here and there, but by and large, they were just kind of like forgotten. She-Devil, I think, is the last one that I saw before this one, with Roseanne Barr, where she kind of plays, I think it's her. Pretty sure I'm 99% sure it's her. But that's the only comedy role that I can actually recall her being in that actually like was on syndication or on TV at the time. With this one though, I was like, so fixated on like how they managed to like get the hole into like Goldie Hawn's body. I was like completely fixated on that. And then I was a full-on adult before I remembered, like, holy shit, that is Bruce Willis. Because he's not doing any of the normal Bruce Willis things at all. The things that we all know him for, the glower, the stare, just him, explosions in the back. And I think it's a great example of what might have been if we actually pushed for Bruce Willis, as a character actor instead of like Bruce Willis, the action star. Because he's amazing in this one. I just watched it today. I still forget that it's Bruce Willis. I have to keep on reminding myself, like, that's
it's the hair. It's the
Goldie Hawn, perfect, gorgeous. She's a very, very gorgeous girl, but like a lot of her, because she is a comedic actress, especially in the 80s and 90s, they really deviated from making her glamorous, or they would always use her glamour like in a really like like almost like the way that they would in Overboard, where it was kind of like a joke as to like how pretty and glamorous she was. And to see it even taken even further than that in this really campy way, like I just, it was on HBO. It was usually what happened with HBO releases is that it was on for a year before they would release it into syndication for like, the Sunday matinee movies on TV. So I was obsessed with this movie for that full year that it was on HBO, and then always trying to catch it whenever it was on. But then of course, like trying to explain to your mom, like why at 10, 11 years old, you should be allowed to watch a movie where Meryl Streep and Han are murdering each other. It didn't go over well. So I had to wait a while before I could actually watch it again. Just because, because my mom was not having it for a few years with this movie. But yeah, I love this film. Completely obsessed with it when it came out on TV.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think this is definitely a deviation. Like, this is no Bridges of Madison County, right? This isn't the Meryl Streep that we see in drama or in romance movies or like serious movies, serious things. And it was a while until she actually, started to do sort of, comedic roles again, right? And I feel like this was definitely one of those films where, it was super campy, and you're right. Like, you look at Bruce Willis and you're like, that's not Bruce. That's not
John McClane.
That's not Die Hard. That's not Corbin Dallas, right? Like, that's not. Do you know what I mean? And so it was a different take on all of these characters, and I think all of them did a really great job at producing that. Hi Q, you're here in the chat. Q says, I remember watching it and I was like, oh my God, Bruce Willis looks so nerdy in the movie. Which he did. You're like, you are a cornball, like the whole time. Like, you're a nerdy cornball. Erric, what was your first experience with Death Becomes Her? What was your interactions with it the first time you got introduced to it?
I was one of those kids. I was 4 years old when it came out. But blockbusters and everything like that, you go in. So I remember walking into Blockbuster and just seeing that iconic cover of the red dress, white dress, and Bruce Willis in the middle, and being gravitated towards that. Because I was also the kid that was like the Rocky Horror Picture Show and like Showgirls. Like, the covers caught my eye. I saw this one, and I happened to be with my mom and my uncle, which my uncle was gay and everything. So I was like, I want this movie. Don't know what it's about, but let's get this movie. My uncle's like, so they get the movie and they put it on, and just Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep just being like these gorgeous women, like in these these elevated situations, and still being beautiful, dying and coming back and still being gorgeous and everything like that. I was just like, who is this? I love this. And like I said before, it opened my eyes to my young gay life. But just seeing it and all the witty lines and like you said, Bruce Willis being a comedian in this and being a departure from what we've seen, because I love Fifth Element and everything like that as well. It just really took me into this realm of enjoyment and fantasy that I wanted to be in. So I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, and I think too, also you bring up a really good point. I think for specifically the queer community, like, I haven't met like someone that is in the queer community and hasn't seen this film, and I think it just goes to and speaks to. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I don't want to get yelled at, but I might. But I think it just speaks to like that whole classic Mean Girls type thing where you have two friends that don't really like each other, but have like a superficial sort of friendship, and it's like one of them's glamour, lives the life, does this, does that, is a star, does all this stuff, and the other one's just like, yeah, I'm her friend, like, that's cool. And then finally, gets her comeuppance eventually, and then all of a sudden, right, like, they both find this solution to live forever and to be the most beautiful person on the planet, and then all of a sudden they're also just trying to kill each other the entire time because they want Bruce Willis and don't like each other, right? But I think it speaks to a lot of, I think, queer individuals, because it just, first of all, it's Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn. Let's talk about that. Second of all, yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, and I think anything, but like, besides the fact that Meryl Streep is probably just the most, I will say this, the most versatile actress that I probably have ever encountered in my life, along with some others that I could name. Um, it was one of those films where I was just like, you know what? Like I like like I like, you know what I mean? It's like it's one of those films that I think the queer community resonates with in a way where it's almost like, you know, how do I put this? It's almost like Pink Flamingo in a way where
Yeah.
it's like it's just so campy that like you just gotta love it, right? And it reaches a certain. Oh, go ahead. Just reaches certain people.
I agree with you on that one, but I also think just like it becoming, because a lot of people, especially like a lot of drag artists and stuff like that, do call it a gay cult classic. It drew on that like femininity that both of them had in that, but also the dichotomy of how society was projecting their image on them and how much they were trying to fit into this box, but they were still kind of outsiders. So I think that's why the gay community really like pulled towards it to be like, okay,
Sure.
we see ourselves somewhat in this because we're being outcasted too and trying so hard to fit in, and it's showing us that you guys are just fighting for this ideal that society wants it to put on you, and that's what we're doing and trying to come out and be beautiful and everything like you are. But I think that's why the gay community really pulled to it, like, oh, we can kind of see ourselves in this.
Sure.
I think to your point, I think, when they call it a gay, cult following, I think we're mostly talking about gay men. And I think that is a audience that we have to acknowledge, especially when we talk about the discourse, especially in the mainstream, where it's kind of like this idea that gay men are somehow always perceived as more effeminate than straight men. And then, of course, the insult being that like to be effeminate, to be feminine, to indulge any of that is wrong and bad, right? So we always see that where, with these gay cult films, it always seems to be like some fixation on this, extreme female character in some way, right? Because it's always like this thing of like, well, they're being honest. If it's extreme, more than likely it's an honest and sometimes not exactly like polite emotion or expression. And it's like, I love that they can just do whatever the hell they want, and it's nice, and it's not always something that I think a lot of people, especially when I think I think we're all queer here, right? I think we're all queer individuals, so I think we all have that
we're all weird, right? Like
right?
we're all really weird.
No, but like I've not asked for anybody's like orientation, but I'm making the assumption, and but shame on me for doing that, but I think everybody here on the stream is queer tonight. And we've all had that experience of like being less than honest with folks in our lives, especially when it comes to our own sexuality. And then to see characters that are just in such an extreme with their emotions, where it's just like, oh, they can just do that. Isn't that nice? Wouldn't that be liberating and awesome? And then also too, especially when they're glamorous, it's like this embrace of the feminine to such a degree that it's like, that would be great too. And that would be, liberating as well, especially when our society just feels like to be feminine to an extreme degree is, or any degree really, any degree that deviates from a socially acceptable way, especially if you're a man, especially, or even if you're a woman, right? There's a specific way that you're supposed to be, and if you deviate too far away from that, then you're a slut, you're a skank, you're a diva, you're catty, you're any number of things, right? So I think that yes, 100%. All the reasons why our communities just 100% gravitate toward it. But also it's like there's a song and dance number, the production's amazing, the wardrobe's amazing, the campiness is just mwah. The fact that it's a horror comedy, the fact that it's this very specific subgenre of comedy and horror that we always seem to really love, like Addams Family, Shaun of the Dead. Like we always gravitate to those kinds of films in some sort of way where it's like, yeah, that feels like we have something that we can connect to with that. So I just think for all the reasons, we love this movie, but especially the queer communities.
Yeah, I appreciate both your perspectives because it was like I was like trying to catch like what it really was, and I was like, what is this, right? And I think both of you hit really good points where it resonates within the queer community. I want to talk about first one of my sexual awakenings, and that is Rossellini. That literally, I was watching that, and just the scene where Meryl Streep goes in and she comes out of the pool, right? I was like, who is this woman, right? Who is this beautiful woman, first of all, right? And it was at a time when I knew what I was, but I didn't. But I also was like, I wasn't confused, but watching this, I could appreciate it, right? And then as you know, both of their scenes for them going to see Isabella Rossellini, I was like, this woman is extremely attractive. She is beautiful in everything she has on. And there was just this air of like, it is what it is, right? And this is how yeah, and it was like, it was regal. It was it was confidence. It was so her character, I think her character made this film for me. Like, right? It was almost like the rubber stamp of approval in my head that this film is exactly what it needed it to be, right? Because she goes on to explain, you know, this is what you want. And if you don't want it, that's fine. But also look at me, and this is what I've accomplished, and this is what you all can get, right? But also be careful, because you have to realize that you're going to live forever. And you know, there are some consequences with that. And but I just think all of the scenes with I just think her freaking character made this movie for me. What do you feel about the casting for this? Do you feel like they could have done better? Do you feel like it was spot on? Let's go to Erric.
No, at the time when all of them were doing it, Isabella Rossellini was a bigger name and was going to catch the eye because she was gorgeous, she was beautiful, she was everything they wanted from that role. So casting couldn't be any better. What I did find surprising though is you mentioned the scene where she gets out of the pool where she's naked. That actually isn't her. She had a body double for that. Because she had felt like she had gotten to a certain age to where she couldn't do that. And in Hollywood at the time, that was very true. Like women at a certain age, you wouldn't see them naked hardly or anything like that. So they got a body double for her stepping out because she felt so uncomfortable doing it.
But that was her with when she was talking, right? And then with the whole
that was her. Just the whole naked part. Yeah.
She was 40.
Yeah,
and looked like that.
Right.
Exactly.
Correct. But it also, if you look at the movie itself, and they're like, I'm older, I'm fighting for this beauty and everything like that. And that's the whole thing of this movie is you're gorgeous, like we're gonna live forever. I'm beautiful, I'm gorgeous, but she was still uncomfortable enough and didn't think she was that gorgeous to be naked because she didn't think people were gonna appreciate it like we would have. So that's a little weird little thing in my head when I think about it. I'm like, okay, you were this beautiful, confident woman, but society in Hollywood at the time didn't make you feel beautiful and confident to be able to do
it. Oh, we love misogyny in the 90s. I think, I think I'm glad you told me that, because that literally brings up another point where it's like, you know, this was a day, like you're right, this was a film about beauty, living forever, keeping that sort of standard of just, I would say like plasticness, right? And thinking that that's what was the status quo back then, which is what this movie basically was trying to do, right? I mean, you have Meryl Streep in the beginning where the young guy that she's with tells her she's too old, right? And then she like goes in this deep depression, like she tries to do things that, you know, make her feel young again. And then, you know, she hears about, you know, this woman, and then she does that. And then you have, you know, Goldie Hawn, who feels like she's just second best and will never be good enough and needs to feel validated by the man that she wants to be with, right? And I feel like this speaks to a larger societal issue, especially like now, right? Like we're starting to see more body positivity, we're starting to see more progressiveness and movements with, you know, females and with femininity. But in the 90s, like you didn't really see that, right? You saw more of the let's just stick to what's going on. Let's just sort of stick to what is tolerable, right? Like how can we just live a normal life and not have to, you know, ruffle any feathers, right? And I think you bring up a good point. Okay, Toni, what do you think about Isabella?
She's gorgeous. She's beautiful. She's everything that this movie needed. Yeah, Isabella Rossellini just is always one of those actresses where I'm just like, she is iconic, she is beautiful, she definitely has a place within like Hollywood, especially like within cinema history. And I was always upset that she wasn't bigger than what she already was. Like, 'cause she made a name
Absolutely.
for herself in Italy as like a model. She did a couple of films here and there because I believe she comes from, you know, a filmmaker family.
Yep.
There was already an in for her. And then she finally started making American movies, and she had like a, you know, a fair amount of American movies that were coming out, and it's always like, you know, these really um you know, she consistently worked, but to see her in something like this where it is just such a you know, I think this movie is making a lot of points, but especially one that is just so pointed about the perception of beauty and youth, and especially about the way in which we appreciate and consume beauty and youth. I just felt like that is exactly who you get. That is 100% the kind of person that you get. You get somebody who basically made their name with their face and their body. And it doesn't surprise me at all, the fact that she was 40 years old and could absolutely kill it, like like literally like topless with jewels covering her, but you know, wasn't comfortable with doing the pool scene, or somebody somewhere not comfortable with her doing the pool scene. I don't know if that was a studio decision or her own. But yeah, like I just 100% like believe that that was the right choice, especially getting somebody that American audiences would have known, would have seen, and would have appreciated like for their beauty, but at the same time, somebody that would have been obviously not American. Like this, there's no way that this character could have been played by an American actress.
Nope.
Just with an accent, right? Because you needed
Nope.
somebody like and Italian actresses like throughout the ages. I mean, all reaching back all the way to like Bridget Bardot and all, like, you know, the
Loren, all of them, like
right, all of those, you know, gals from the 40s, 50s, and 60s killing it. Like, there's no other choice that we could have actually said, like, yeah, you can just grab like any other, like, no, you needed somebody with some gravitas. You needed somebody who was just stunning, and who absolutely would have been game for a movie like this. So I don't, to the top of my mind, I'm like, yeah, you could have gotten somebody who was equally beautiful, but as far as like it having the same impact, I'm just completely drawing a blank. I don't know anybody else that could have played this specific role.
Finding somebody who had that screen power to make us all just be like, oh my god, who is this woman? Like, ugh. Like, now I'm questioning things. I know what I am, but I'm still questioning.
Oh no, there's no question for me.
I was bisexual because I just was like, wow, she's pretty, and obviously everyone else thinks that, right? Right? No,
Yeah, I was just, yeah, I think you're right. I think in a sense there was this sort of air of class that I felt, even though she was just like jewels over the boobs, right? I was like, no, like that's still classy. Like you're like,
right.
and I mean, and I don't mean that in a way where if somebody else were to do it, it would be like, wouldn't be classy or would be sort of slutty.
Right,
but
there's a line between being sexual and sensual and being like tawdry, and I feel
I love your descriptors.
Yeah, I don't know anybody else that would have been able to like play this the way that she did. It just was like mwah, right down the line.
I'm gonna use your descriptors from now on. Like, yeah, I love that. Yes, so let's
before shows, he's just gonna contact you and be like, this is what I want to say. Give me some more.
Toni, I don't want to say like whorish. Can I say hussy? Like, is that okay? Like, do you know what I mean? I'm gonna be doing that. Can I say harlot? Is that okay? So let's go into Meryl Streep, Goldie Hawn, and Bruce Willis, right? The three mains in this movie. For me, you know, even though Isabella made the movie for me, these three, without this trio, I think the movie would have done worse. I don't think there would have been a better casting for this movie that could have made it better. I think Meryl was Meryl. Like, she's just a freaking chameleon. She can do what she wants to do, even if it's a comedy. And she did it. Like, there were moments where I was dying laughing because of just some of the quotes that she said. Goldie Hawn too, where it's just like, it was out of the ordinary for these characters to be in these roles. And then Bruce Willis, you're like, this dude's a neurotic nerd. Like, he's like doing everything he can for these women, but then finally realizes that like they're fucking nuts. And like he just wants them like gone, right? And I think the casting, the people, the casting director and the people that definitely got these individuals in did a superb job with this. I don't think, I'm trying to think of all the actresses and actors back then, and I don't think this would have done any better with other individuals. Eric, what do you think about the casting with the trio?
Oh, I love this casting. Much like you said, it was a departure for all three of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think all of them at the time were such on top of their games and such professionals that they were able to feed off of each other and create this brilliant piece of work that I truly love. I gave it 5 popcorns.
Spoiler.
Oops. But yeah, no, it's beautiful. The way that they interacted, especially I love that the writers and everything took a play on their names as well, because it's Malin, Ernest, and Helen, and it's Matter and Hell if you put them in shorthand. So I thought that was brilliant, and just the dichotomy of them, I was like, that's perfect, because they are playing together, they are attached like that, and just this movie would not have survived without them. And like you said, I couldn't think of casting anybody else, but you're going to cast like Susan Sarandon or like any of them, they couldn't have had the gumption to do this with each other, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, absolutely. Toni, what did you think about the trio casting?
First, I do want to point out, I don't know if this is Meryl Streep's first time singing on screen. It is the first time I ever recall her singing on screen, though. So whenever she started doing these musicals, Mamma Mia and such, and people were just like, can Meryl even sing? I'm like, what do you mean, can Meryl even sing? Of course she can.
Songbird, don't you remember?
And a disco number. How dare you? All right. She's beautiful and wonderful. No, I just, yeah, I mean, we don't make... I hate to say it like that, but it's like we don't make triple threat actresses like Meryl Streep anymore.
Nope.
There's some folks out there that could do it all, but the way that, literally her whole, and that to me is like the biggest stretch in this entire movie of like, it's a movie about like essentially like undead zombies, right? And the biggest stretch for me is like, yes, people are actually walking out of that Broadway show. Okay. Yeah, it was that bad. Sure. No, but I think to get somebody that could play it that campy without it going so overboard, because we've seen truly campy movies. We've seen those B-list movies where you're just like, this is not good. This is not great, but I effing love it because it's so awful. But this is like, it doesn't even, it doesn't reach that point where you're just like, I'm going to make the choice to like this based on the merits of something else other than the acting. And I don't know of any other like trio that would have like fit these characters as well, but especially when you're talking about making sure that you are towing the line and like, yes, this is extreme. Yes, this is ridiculous. It's campy as all hell. There's no way around that. And to have people that can definitely play into it with it still feeling like, I don't want to say real, but definitely it feeling like emotionally authentic. Because I mean, for me, it's like I don't really love, seeing these sort of like, feminine stereotypes of like the catty, bitchy, like mean girls, frenemies that just hate each other. But it's just like, yes, this is the movie that needed to be 100%. This is the toxic femininity fable that I needed to see 100%. To me, in my mind, I don't need to see anybody else trying to pull it off because it's like they did it beautifully. They did it wonderfully. Sure. And I think it is, I mean, once we start talking about the plot and the story, but I think there's a lot there that we don't really give a lot of credit for, like as a general audience. But yeah, the cast just beautiful, gorgeous. I forget how versatile, especially Bruce Willis can be when you give him something to do other than be Bruce Willis. Goldie Hawn is always hilarious, but whenever you actually make her terrifying, it's like, oh, you are scary. And I love that. Yeah. And I wish they would do more of that. And she would have had more opportunities to be horrifying and scary. But yeah, I love all three.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point where, oh my God, hold on. It like, when it leaves your head and it's like floating. And it did. I'll come back to it because it's probably in my fan right now, and it's just like got stuck. No, but I think with the casting, and I think what you said is absolutely 100% true, in a sense of like these were individuals and these were people that oh, you said okay. You said something. You know what? Let's just move on and then I'll remember it later. So let's get into I literally forgot. It's getting old. That's what's going on. I probably need to go see Isabella Rossellini and take some potion. So let's actually talk about the plot. Let's talk about the story, right? I, you know, I think that I think it was on the nose for the movie. I think it made sense. I think that it flowed in a way where it was like when the singing happened, if I had seen it as an adult for the first time, I would have thought it was the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. But even though when I saw it when I was younger, I was like, oh, this makes sense because she's a Hollywood star, right? Like she does this. This is what she does. This is why she does it, right? And back then, you're right. Like it was one of those things where like I knew Meryl Streep was like a freaking threat because she did sing, and I knew she was in like movies, and I knew she could like dance, right? Like in a way where I was like, oh, like you're a good actress. Like this is what you do. This is your craft, right? And I think it was one of those realizations where I was like, oh, you can put music in really corny movies and not and be okay with it, right? Like and it's fine. But I think that the plot, the way that it happened and the way that it worked out, it just made sense. Oh, that's what you said. I remembered. See, it. So when you said, you're right, I don't like those sort of like girl on girl pitted like plots where it sort of encourages the fact that like girls always need to be in competition with each other, because I feel like that's just a horrible model for young women, teenage women, right? Like teenage girls that we do that with. But this does it in a way where it's like it makes sense like in this predicament, and it also makes sense for this movie. And I think they did it in a way where it was like, well, that will never happen, right? Like it's like that'll never happen in real life, and if it does, it's like it's the Housewives of Beverly Hills. Like that's what it is, right? And I think that for most of us, it's unrealistic in the expectation to hold people to that standard and hold women to that standard. And so you're right. I feel like it was a little. It did what it needed to do in a way where it wasn't necessarily like harmful, if that makes sense.
I think what you're talking about is like taking this premise, right, which is a very real thing, this idea of like, we hear the term toxic masculinity a lot, right? And rightfully so. It's a conversation we all need to have. But I remember somebody asking me, like, is there such a thing as toxic femininity? I'm like, yes, there is, but we've already accepted it as the truth about women. Therefore, it's not necessarily something that we have to unpack, because we already, as a society, believe that women are frivolous, superficial, jealous, catty, vindictive, untrustworthy, like all the negative things that we do hear about women, right? We just never apply the same term to it just because we're, like, oh, that's an awful misogynistic, view of women, right? But with this, whenever you take that to such an absurd degree, then it becomes fun. Then it becomes something that you can put art and actually see and actually show, like, this is how ridiculous all the things that, some people believe about women. That's how ridiculous it is, and for the sake of the story, to take it to its most absurd but logical conclusion, what would you do if you were two incredibly toxic individuals who want nothing more than the validation of the other, but you're completely stuck in this entire loop of like trying to prove that you're the prettiest, you're the youngest, you're the most whatever it may be. You're the person most deserving of the male validation within your life. And it's like the fact that it's Bruce Willis playing, not even Bruce Willis, because Bruce Willis is an attractive man. And especially at that point in 1992, he was still a young, hot dude. And the fact that they had to just paint on the constant like 5 o'clock and then give him like this really ghoulish, like pink gray makeup on the rest of his face just to make him look like so weird and like he really is ghoulish, and it's just
Well,
like
He is.
even when you first see him before Madeline gets a hold of him, he just has that horrible wig, and he's kind of like shoving
Terrible.
what actually was at the time, and he's just like,
high sweat bangs, yeah.
bad.
And you're like, really? That's the one that y'all are fighting him for? Okay, yeah, that's a choice. Cool.
But even after like they take the potion and everything like that,
Right.
they're still fighting for him. It's just like, really?
Right. And I think, you know, when you're talking about like the fact that they can take it to such an absurd degree, and it's like the movie does get away with a lot, because it's like there are some problematic bits in here where if you were to just take it not as satire, but just as a comedy, where it's just like, oh, we could maybe do with that. Like, you know, Goldie Hawn in a fat suit, like we know like the whole fat suit situation is not ideal. But when I watch that movie, I'm like, okay, so this is an extreme absurdist take on, you know, depression, on jealousy, on mental health, on homicide, because, you know, apparently homicide doesn't even exist in this world. You can't really kill anybody.
Literally.
So yeah, it is this weird horror fairy tale. You know, it I think it does work. I think where, you know, we can have that discussion about like, can you still use those negative things as a way to point out negativity, or is it still playing into the same kind of negativity? Me, I take it as it's a fable, it's a parable. See, if you don't become a better person, you know, especially like, because unfortunately there are a lot of women out there that do internalize these misogynistic messages of like, you do have to be in competition with women. And there are a lot of men out there who like to feed you that line too. I've had a lot of men, especially in my time here in LA, that like to say, or like they would like to ask me, well, aren't you jealous of like the other woman that's in the room? I'm like, why? Well, what if she gets the job? I'm like, then good for her. Well, what if she's hot and she's just using her body? Absolutely. She worked hard for that body. Let her work and let her get paid. Like, who cares? Like, that's fine. And that's because like I don't have a well of misogyny to pull from whenever I actually interact with other women. But unfortunately, a lot of other people have internalized those messages. So I do think it's a great thing whenever you can, one, talk about, you know, misogyny. You can talk about the hypocrisy of beauty and youth, especially in Hollywood, and consuming it. When you're talking about you know, just jealousy in general. For me, this movie plays like an old 1940s and 50s movie where, like, you know, it would have been like two vindictive, bitchy film noir, like, you know, actresses just would have been backstabbing each other, and it just would have been so dramatic. And people would have been like fainting everywhere. And it just like, that to me is what it feels like, but it's just in the 90s. And it just happens to be directed by Robert Zemeckis, because when I think about Robert Zemeckis' work, it's like, this is not at all the message in so many of his movies. His movies are usually very upbeat, very optimistic, very poignant in some way or form. And the fact that he decided to use his powers for the sake of this horror movie, I'm like, I am so for it. I think it's amazing. I think it's great. I think it's such a singular movie that it's like, if you try to group it with something else, it's like you would have to be, again, I'm using horror comedy as a very loose label for it, because I'm like, I don't know what other movie that I would ever group this with. I don't know of any other, like, I would never be able to figure out a double feature. Death Becomes Her, and then what else? I don't know. Addams Family. I don't. Yeah.
I mean,
Again,
like,
other scenes up next to it. It's such a particular movie. It's such a specific moment in time. I think it stands up. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's beautiful. The plot, I could think about it all day, because again, my plot, like the plot holes are, I'm just like, so is everyone who we thought is dead is actually alive? Elvis, Marlene, like everyone.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
where do they stay?
Yeah, I want to bring up the point that you brought up, but I want to go to Erric really quick. Erric, what did you think about the plot? What did you think about the story? Did you think it flowed? Did you think it? You know?
I really did. I really do like how, because it doesn't, even when you're watching it, even though it is a little bit longer of a movie for the time, it doesn't seem that long, and it very much flows, and there's no lag time. Everything's picking up from where you last left. Like that first scene where they first meet Madeline, right into the wedding, right into the house, right into her going to the sea. It just was very quick and smart. I think it's now looking back on it and watching it since we were doing this, it feels like it's almost like a time capsule, a perfect time capsule for 1992 to show what they were trying to do with like the beauty aspect of it, the cattiness of women that they were trying to show and everything like that, like you were bringing up. It just encapsulates all of that era of Hollywood perfectly, and it brings it into this time to where you're like, okay, I get it, because like you said, it's the horror comedy, and they did it so smartly and so tongue-in-cheek that you don't take it offensive, and you're like, they're actually trying to say something, which I loved about that movie. Loved the flow of it and everything like that. It was just smart. It was very well done for all of them.
Yeah, and I want to get back to what you were saying, Toni, about like the fine line, right, between being so like PC, where it's like, and then like, I think so. I think if this movie came out today, modernized, people, not at all, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying like, I mean, back in the 90s, you can get away with a lot because people weren't like taking to the streets. They weren't doing shit that they were doing like now, like, you know, when everything is on social media, it's instant. It's like, it's instantaneous. This is what's going on. But I feel like this movie made fun of those things rather than perpetuated what we feel and what we see. And I feel like that was a way for me to be like, oh, right. Like as a kid, and to be fair, I had really progressive parents, but I mean, they weren't saying that like, you know, the government is out to get me or whatever. But I never saw this movie and was like, oh, that's how all women are. Oh, that's what's good. It literally was like, this is a woman who has everything, right? And then this is a woman who is depressed, who, right, is like wearing a fat suit, right? Because I didn't know that that was wrong when I was younger, right? And then watching this and being like, this was just a funny film, right? Now, if I would have watched it and it came out with like modern like actors, like I would have been like, this is stupid. Who decided to do this? Like, why is this a thing? Like, aren't we past this, right? And I feel like a lot of people sort of don't think that deeply about it, but then when you really go and watch it, you're like, no, this was the reality for people, like especially for women, like back in the 90s, right? Like, but at the same time, like it's funny. It's funny to laugh at these things that are actually reality for some people, and not in a way where it's like we're making fun of them, but in a way where it's like, can we just like talk about how this is actually how some men think and how some women think and how some women's expectations of like themselves need to be and should be, right? Like they feel like they need to take a potion to make them live forever and look younger, so that way they can get a man, right? And I feel like it's a funny way to sort of project ways. How do I put this? It's almost like I can't remember the name, but it's like it's almost like a caricature of the stereotypes that we put on individuals, right? Like that we put on people. And so hold on, Q said something. Q said the story was campy, like you guys said, but it was so funny and it's still relevant. That's so good, right? Like all of this is still relevant, which is why like you watch it today and you're like, this is the funniest shit I've ever seen. But also when I watched like Selling Sunset on Netflix, like these are those women, right? Like these are exactly who those women are. And I'm like,
exactly who would be.
And I'm like,
taking that person.
Well, they're
I'm like,
women, but like you said, they could never remake that today because it would not be accepted by any means.
Right. I feel like anytime you want to make something like this, you have to go so deep into a genre film that you can't really sit into this, because I think that's also the problem with this movie. It made its money back. It wasn't like an out and out flop. It just happened to come at a really weird time. I think I read on Wikipedia that it actually was the same weekend that Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, came out.
Oh geez.
And also Bebe's Kids. And none of those movies, like none of those movies were like out and out like #1 hits, right? But it just was kind of like this weird weekend where it's like these mid-level, mid-budget sort of movies like came out, and Buffy sort of kind of did well, not really. Bebe's Kids, definitely did well a little, no, not really. I think it made its money back essentially. So I think with this movie, if you try to make it today, you would have to either go so deep into horror, right? Like the way that Jordan Peele does with his projects, where it's like, I'm going to make a movie about something that isn't just for the gore and the blood and the horror of it all, but I have to make it within the confines of a genre film in order for it to be accepted by an audience, right? Or you make it like an SNL sketch, right? And then it becomes so deep into a comedy that it's like, okay, we get that this is something, there's something else there, and they're not trying to actually do that. There are some bits that are going to remain problematic just because it's like, okay, things that you could get away with 30 years ago, just things that wouldn't be received well. But even just the overall premise of the movie, yeah, I just don't see how anybody would actually be able to take that and actually just say, like, we're just going to make a movie. We're going to see where it lands. And tonally, who knows? I feel like now we live in a time with it, it's like, you have to have a specific audience in mind. You have to know, because of your focus group research, how well, it's going to do. There are no risks taken anymore, especially studio film. So I definitely do feel like you either have to be an independent filmmaker who just happens to, either have a contract like Jordyn Peele, and you can be a Jordyn Peele and you can do whatever kind of movie you want, or you have to veer so far to the other side that it's kind of like they never would have put a shotgun to Goldie Hawn's chest and shot her like a fucking cannibal across like there's no way they would have done that. But
with that scream too.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. I miss the 90s, at least for that. I like there was a little bit more experimentation. There wasn't such a fixation on this movie is this, and that's all it can be, and this is the audience for it, that you could just, I've got a great script. I think it's going to be a gas. Let's just see where it goes. And if hopefully the marketing will support it and hopefully an audience will find it.
I mean, I agree with you. Like a lot of movies in that time, like look at Death Becomes, or look at Tu Wong Fu, look at The Fifth Element, look at all of them. We have this great script. We have the idea. Let's do it. Let's play. Let's have fun.
Let's just see. For shits and giggles. Let's just see. Like,
movie
making used to be more of a gamble. It used to be more of like, maybe you don't work ever again after this movie. Maybe you become the toast of the town after this. Who knows? Anything could happen. But I guess, it's just there are definitely things that I miss about the 90s where you felt like you could have things that are still relevant today because it's not so far away from our current world. Because I don't watch anything from the 40s or 50s and think like, yeah, that's really how our society could be, or that's really relevant. There's a couple of outliers here and there, but at least in the 90s, it's like there's a good mix of practical and CGI effects. There's a good mix of like, societal messaging that still applies to us today, sadly. So it's just, I miss the 90s. Man.
Okay, so really quick, because I didn't do this. On this show, we rate by popcorn buckets. Let's do a popcorn bucket rating. So it's a 0 out of 5 or 1 out of 5, 0 out of 5. Toni, what do you give this movie?
Yeah, 4 out of 5. I don't know why I'm taking a popcorn bucket away now that I think about it, because I'm like, I love this movie. I think it's great. I think it's amazing. I think the only thing I would have liked is if there was maybe a punchier ending. I think that's the only thing that kind of like, I feel like the movie is really, 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 really great. And then the last 2 minutes is just kind of like funeral. And I'm like, I would have, but the ending though, I mean, look at this. Jordyn, look at your background. How could you end this movie with anything else? Just dismembered limbs strewn about on a church staircase. Like I don't know how else you would have ended it, but I think for me, like, it's like, I don't know how you would have fixed it, but I would have liked it to be a little bit more, just more. I don't know. Maybe I wanted a longer ending. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Sure. No, you do. And Erric, what would you rate this film out of popcorn buckets?
Oh, well, this is one of my absolute favorite films of all time. So I give it a 5 out of 5.
And he is correct. Yes.
I'm wrong. Especially with us talking and everything, like this cast, the way the comedy was, they set up things like the glamour in it, the kind of darkness in it. I mean, look at your background, like she said, them spinning around on their heels broken, like killing, like it's
her head spinning at the end too, because they
and then just standing there and then just being like, where did we park the car?
Yeah. Do you remember where we parked the car?
But and that's another reason, because like the lines in this movie.
Oh,
just like the multiple
dialogue is great.
Yeah, I am gonna agree with Toni. I will give it a 4 out of 5. It's very hard for me to do a 5 out of 5 for a movie. But this movie is enjoyable, it's amazing. The one-liners for me were absolutely 100% made this film. And I think one of the most, for me, one of the most one of the most iconic scenes is at the funeral when they're laughing. And she goes, "I think we killed him." And then they're like, and people are looking back like, "Are you guys really laughing at a funeral?" Is probably one of the most, because, and I know there's memes and there's gifs of it where it's like when you and your friend are at a funeral of the person that you really didn't like, and then they go, people go, literally one of the most iconic scenes I've ever, and because it's hilarious. It's funny because they didn't really like him. They just fought over him for like shits and giggles, and then all of a sudden they're just like,
Well,
okay, well, yeah. So,
Enough of that.
yeah, and I feel like this film, you know, as we get to the close of our little broadcast, I feel like this film, it's definitely one of those things where it's like it needs to be in your film library, it needs to be in your film repertoire, because it's one of those films. Like, you can't deny that this film is, I don't want to say it's one of the best films, but it is a great film. It is good. It is comedy. It is beauty, right? Like, it is just something that deserves its own sort of like set, and its own like place in Hollywood.
it's definitely one of those movies that like you can pull stuff on it. Like, we've been talking for as long as we have, but you can pull out like the lines where she's sitting in the back of the thing and they're like, "Oh, we think we killed him," or when they fall down the stairs and she doesn't even say a line, but all you hear is "oh" before she falls down. That's one of the funniest things I ever think, because Meryl's just doing it. And I think all of us can pull back to like those little lines like "now a warning" and all of that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And like, she was glamorous, but they were funny, and it lives on, and I that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the bottoms up. I always do that with shots. And there's only been like 2 people in my life that have been like, "Oh my god, that stuff becomes her." And I'm like, yeah, like, but it's also just like a thing that people say. But I always try to say it in the Meryl voice. So it's like, bottoms up. And then you just do it, right? Any last minute thoughts, any last minute things about Death Becomes Her? Any suggestions to people that are like, I'm kind of like on the edge of like watching this movie? I don't know. Toni, let's go to you.
I mean, another reason why I think I like, well, just Zemeckis's work, but definitely films from the 90s. They're always great on a rewatch. They were made for a rewatch, you know. So there's always like some detail or something that you can focus on. And we didn't really get into it here, but I mean, like the set design, beautiful, gorgeous. The wardrobe. I mean, the you know, the red top with the black little capris that Goldie is wearing when she gets a hole cut into her, and I mean like that white top with Meryl's shape. I mean, like, just the fact that like so much of what's happening here is just like so gorgeous, so immediate, and I think it like tells so much and it forms so much about the characters and the story without even really having to do anything. One of my favorite parts of the movie is that part where she goes to the salon and she's talking to the girl. And that girl has a French accent until she gets scared, and then she completely drops it. And she's just, and it's so clear that like nobody there is French, absolutely nobody. They're all just like from Sheboygan or something, and like they're all just like completely pretending. And I just love that. I love that it completely informs that, like, okay, so nobody here at this weird like dialysis salon, like nobody is actually like can come through on anything they're talking about. They're just selling snake oil. I love it. And I think there's little bits in every little scene that kind of like talks about that. I mean, Bruce Willis's scenes like in the funeral home where he has to deal with that like weird guy and his contorted face, and it's just like you can't give him character and depth. People have to recognize him, and it's like, like there's so many things where it's like little bitty lines, little bitty reactions, a set piece, or even I completely forgot how genius where Goldie Hawn is doing the whole like, Madeline, I have to speak to Madeline. And it's that really like gentle pullback and it's like her whole death shrine around her mirror. I was like, oh, it's such a good camera move. And it just immediately told you everything that you needed to know about those like years after her being in that clinic. Like, okay, so she's not any better. She's still fixated. Now she's homicidal. Got it. Nothing else needs to be said. There's so many good things about this movie, especially on the rewatch.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Eric? Any last minute thoughts?
For this movie, just for anybody like just on the edge of it though, it's just one of those great sit down movies that you can put on and just catch those lines like I was talking about. Just catch those lines or those little scenes. Like you don't even really have to pay attention to it to enjoy the brilliance of it. And like you were saying, to appreciate the costumes and the set design, even all the CGI. We didn't really even touch about like how they did all that because there was CGI and they were Meryl Streep had a green sack over her face and walked backwards to do one of the scenes. Like, and we didn't even touch that. So there's all those little things that make this movie brilliant and beautiful. And just take the time, sit down and watch because you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a film that you could easily introduce anybody to and just be like, just watch it. I know it's like corny and campy, but please just freaking watch it. It's going to be probably one of the funniest things you see, but also it just teaches you a lot about, things that are actually going on and, just like how people will die for like certain things in life and still not be happy, right? Like, and I appreciate it for the lessons and also just the entertainment, value that it brought to it. So, well, friends, I think this is the end. This is, the death that becomes us. And it's all the time that we have to talk about death becomes her. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to join our Discord to keep the conversation going. Shout out to my guests tonight, Eric and Toni. It is wonderful to see you both. Thank you for this wonderful conversation, this wonderful queer conversation. And I love it. I love to see it. So let's, where can we find you all? Like, what's going on? Are you on the socials? Eric, where can we find you?
I am on socials. I'm on Snapchat and Instagrams and the Facebooks. You can find me under Heartless7. It's my gamer tag, everything like that. But just acting, well, taking a break because I had surgery. But we'll get back in there and start doing stuff. So just keep a lookout.
Yes, we'll be surgery buddies on Wednesday. So we'll be great. I hate the human body. That's all I have to say right now. I feel like the picture behind me right now. That's what I feel like.
No, very accurate.
Yeah, I feel like the picture behind me. Toni, where can we find you? Where can we see your wonderful, awesome self?
I hope the both of you get better soon. My goodness. But no, everybody can find me on all social medias at the Toni Sanchez, Toni with an I, Sanchez with a Z.
Yes, follow these wonderful, lovely individuals, please. They're doing awesome and amazing work, as always. And I'm so proud to see the people that come on my show and do wonderful and successful things. So please do that. You can find me on Instagram, City of Stars 13. That's where I think I post the most. I do a lot of stories and not a lot of posts, but you can find me on there. So that's where you can find all of us. So don't ever forget that Nom Watch Review and Basic Binges are now in podcast form. You can listen to it the next day on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and where you get your podcasts. Please subscribe to our YouTube and Twitch, all of our platforms, anywhere, everywhere, and in between and in the upside down are at Nom Talk Network. So you can follow us then. Tune in to our next show, which is going to be Nom Watch Review, which is going to be the 1987 Lost Boys, which is going to be Wednesday night. So please tune in to that. And I think, Toni, you're going to be doing that, right?
What, Lost Boys?
Yeah, right? No,
I don't think so. But now thinking about it, I should, because I could just go on for at least 30 minutes about the saxophone dude in that movie. So.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
I could just go. That's another one of those gay movies for me that I'm just like, oh, hello, gay awakening.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's give a quick shout out to our number one producer, Steph. We love you. You're awesome and amazing, and we love the fact that you put these together. You sit in the background and listen to our shenanigans, listen to our shit, and don't really say anything, and we love you. So we love you for putting on this whole entire thing. No, we love you, and death does not become you. So anyway, until then, it is wonderful to see you all. I'm your host, Jordyn Orozco, and I hope you all have a nomorific evening. We'll see you all later. Bye.